Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you, Ralph. My name's Naomi. I've got about 13 years in the humanitarian field in all sorts of different countries with all sorts of different organisations wearing various different hats. I'm very passionate about maps because one of those hats is actually an NGO called MapAction, which goes into the field doing information management, helping to create a common operational picture, with one of my other hats, which is the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, a couple of jobs that I've done with them. I'll try and keep this kite short. I'm very conscious that fairly shortly I'm going to be competing with pizza, and I'm under no illusion. I'm also trying to talk to a screen here, if you're wondering why every so often I look down there. Hi guys. Hi. I've got people waving at me from Wales on the screen. If you have any questions, what I'll do for the sake of the fact I believe it's being recorded, I will try and take them at the end, if that's okay, just for continuity. So, humanitarian field and maps, why are they absolutely amazing, and why is the work that you do instrumental into making a big difference on the ground? So, there's over 100 UN field officers, I think over 130 now actually, and over 40,000 INGOs, climbs all the time, in countries with regards to there being national NGOs. There's actually way more. For example, there's in India alone 1 to 2 million. In Russia, 277,000. All of those different organisations are working towards the humanitarian response at various different levels, peacekeeping, political, or humanitarian field operations, all of which need all sorts of information products to make decisions, of which mapping is one of those. Mapping is, as you know, one of the best ways to work on the ground. It's one of the best ways to make decisions, because a picture speaks 1,000 words, but you've got to think about all these different people from different countries trying to come onto the same page, and you're never going to get that through what would be 1,000 pages of documentation. Our work varies greatly. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room who've done some field work themselves. I've already spoken to a couple from MSF and others who wear other hats. With one factor, making a difference in the world. So, with my different hats, which I'll summarise as humanitarian emergency responder, we provide and coordinate humanitarian assistance, protecting and promoting humanitarian rights, assisting all sorts of different countries to combat the supply of illicit drugs, to fight against crime and corruption, and we do all of that by providing information through things like the maps that you create to not only the international organisations that I've talked about, but actually the national. A lot of the information can go to national disaster management authorities, which also make a big difference on the ground long term. Within that, there's lots of specialised functions, some very, very technical people who work in what we call different sectors or clusters, all of which would use the information that's on the work that you do. So we have something called the cluster system, for example, logistics, shelter, water, sanitation, protection, gender-based violence. Each of those is people that work within them that do information management, but that are technical specialists in their own right that use the information you give through this kind of work to help inform the way they do everything. From the logistics, I've seen a lot of people clicking on some roads in some areas that I know would be very difficult. All of a sudden it's opened up a whole world to them that they can have that layer of information with all sorts of other layers of information on top to make a more informed decision. It's not always the easiest thing in the world. It can be quite arduous. I've got a couple of pictures throughout this presentation. I've focused it on Haiti, of which there may well be some people who responded there in 2010, and sort of where Haiti is now, with a couple of examples from other places. Can be hard work, infrastructure can be poor, the risk can be not ideal, but it's the ability to offer people the opportunity to rebuild. And I think the whole point is lots of people go into the field, but it's not about the person who goes into the field, it's about the bigger picture and all the cogs that make up what we do in the field, and obviously this is a huge part of it. Information is key. We don't make decisions without it. That entire situation would be far worse if this kind of work wasn't being done behind the scenes. So I'm sure some of you have seen this, the humanitarian, or not the humanitarian, sorry, the disaster cycle. Anyone seen this before? Any hands in the room? Anyone done geography? I know Ralph has. You have? Yeah, a few hands. So this is what we use in the field, because we do a lot of pre-disaster work, then you've got the response, and then you've got the post-disaster work, and obviously then the situation's changed, and that's where people like you come in again, because you update that information post said hurricane, etc., etc. But maps in all of these situations come in incredibly useful. They're very important. So if I start with the actual response, say the earthquake in Haiti, in the first couple of days, it was all of your situational maps, who was where, what were they doing, what the situation was on the ground with regards to refugee camps, if they were primarily displaced, where we had water that was potable, where we might be able to have road systems that could get that water to those refugee camps. It goes on, but that's when all that kind of mapping starts. And actually with Haiti, because it was an earthquake response, those initial few weeks actually became very much about urban search and rescue, and a lot of the maps were sectorising large areas of a place called, well, the capital, Port-au-Prince, and then Leogane, which was actually the epicentre. And all of this information on top allowed us to actually inform where some of that response needed to go, which did save lives. Okay? Then you get down to sort of providing immediate assistance and assessing the damage. A lot of remote sensing was used for that, to actually look at the before and after of the earthquake, and that was a lot of remote digitising done by people like yourselves, which was absolutely fantastic. Onto your ongoing resistance, restoration of infrastructure and reconstruction moves into your post-disaster with economy and social recovery, ongoing development activities. Again, all of the kind of information that you're doing is really useful into this kind of work. It saves a lot of time. And then you get back round to your risk assessments and mitigation and prevention, and all of your sort of planning and programming and projects to try and be better prepared for, unfortunately, in a lot of these countries, the next event. I'm going to show you a quick video of Haiti, just to sort of give you an understanding of what it was like out there and how the information was really used. You'll actually see MapAction on the ground, who do work a lot with OSM, using maps as one of their key tools. Okay, so huge emergency, one of the largest that we've seen, disaster, with a lot of work that went into it from all sorts of different sectors. I'll just go through a couple of photos to give you an idea. So, search and rescue phase, actually going out to the buildings. This V with a cross through it means a victim that perished, unfortunately. If you see a V, that's one that they're still trying to dig to save. All that kind of information was going back and being put on layers on top of maps to help inform us where there were sort of, well, basically the density of population that were missing, where we needed to put more resources, on top of all the other information like the roads, so we knew if we could get certain types of trucks down with certain types of emergency response. The OSOC, which is the United Nations On-Site Operations Coordination Centre, it's an information management hub. It has an online side to it, and as you can see, the majority of the information products were all maps. And I think within the first week in Haiti, we had, or first couple of weeks, around about 500 NGOs come into the country or be there already. All of them would come through this area, through the reception centre, request maps, and use that as one of their primary tools to start enabling their response. Not very nice, but obviously, unfortunately, a part of the rollout there. A lot of people, unfortunately, lost their lives, and one of the things that had to be done was removing them and taking them to mass graves, and we did have to use some of the information to do that, to allow us to work out where to put those mass graves. It was logistics. Talking of logistics, big warehouses full of all sorts of non-food items and food items that we were distributing. We did have a problem in Haiti where it was stuck on the airport field for quite a while, and this was to do with various ministries, and it did cost organisations a lot of money, but as soon as it was released, it was sent out as quickly as possible to all the different areas that that we had identified had the greatest need. Aerial imagery, as you know, remote sensing isn't just anything that comes from satellites. Aerial imagery, well, remote sensing is anything that's taken from a height. So we used a lot of information doing helicopter assessments on Black Hawks to take photographs, geocorrect them, and then actually overlay them on some of our other information to get an idea of how the camps were growing, whether they be sort of more formal ones or spontaneous ones. The mapping team, so like you guys, but in the field, in a tent, which was a bit hotter and muggier, and a few tarantulas, which wasn't ideal. But great guys, all very keen. All these guys are volunteers, and they belong to an NGO called MapAction that again work very closely with OSM or with HOT, which is their humanitarian operational team. So you're all far more affiliated with that than I am, but they did some great work. Told you it can be arduous conditions. I got dengue twice whilst I was out there and ended up in hospital. So just to give you an idea, it was great when you come back out and your life's being made easier because the information's already there. Things that turn it on its head. Sorry for the political stuff, but you get a lot of famous people coming into emergency response, and it does slow things down. Obviously at the same time it does bring in a lot of funding and awareness, but we had Clinton come in a few times. One of my favourite ones was John Travolta drove his own aeroplane onto the runway and then stood there for ages and wouldn't get off the runway when we needed to get other flights in because he was so busy hanging his head out the window getting all his promo shots. It was just like, that's great, can we have the aid? This is the British Search and Rescue Team. Great guys. There was, I think, over 30, Nihan had just said in the video, but over 30 search and rescue teams there, a lot of which were from Latin America. There were huge language barriers. Again, information products are really great with that because in that country we have people speaking Creole, we have people speaking French, we have people speaking Spanish and English. And that's actually quite few languages compared to some of the other responses you can go to where there will be multiple being used all the time in coordination meetings. So you can imagine how an information product, which is a map, which is a massive picture which has everything on it, is just instrumental. And this is one of my favourites. This is the British Embassy. What you'll like and what you'll notice is their little tea making kit out the front. That was the highlight of one of the trips. But they set up on the airport field and worked very closely with the coordination centre and used the same information products as everybody else. So just a couple of really quick pictures to give you an idea. This is beyond the earthquake. This is moving into what we said was sort of the other phases and how information is still used when it's not in the wake of an emergency, in the wake of a disaster. I was working on a prison project. Well, I went to Haiti for 2 weeks and I came back a year and a half later, so that gives you an idea. But I ended up working in the prisons with the issues there with overcrowding, and this is what we ended up creating. We were rebuilding in there. We were trying to speed up the process of getting detainees out who were in there completely illegally because they'd basically all escaped during the earthquake, and then the security force, or the police if you like, in the country had just randomly gone around refugee camps and picked up people and thrown them back in, so the numbers were the same. So we were working with the social and legal secretaries to try and process them very quickly because all of the archives had been burnt in a fire during the earthquake, and also at the same time build more space in the prison because they were living in, well, basically in a room where there should have been 20, there was over 100, and unfortunately, as most of you know, later on that year we had the cholera in Haiti, which meant that, and it did hit the prison, so a lot of people were dying very quickly. That was the foundations of the building in the prison. So Haiti, this was 4 years on after the earthquakes. This was actually 2014, and it was getting a lot worse. Refugee camps were still absolutely everywhere. A lot of the work that you guys were doing, so you had all the information post-earthquake and the pre and the post-satellite imagery, and the new stuff was being digitised, and you had a lot of camps all over the place that were just growing, and this is an example of one. This was 4 years on after the earthquake. People were still living in tent cities, and they still are today. So this is why making sure you've got a group of volunteers who are sort of working on all the bits you're doing, but then going back and reworking on updated satellite imagery is really instrumental, because the situation does change. Hopefully it gets better, but not all the time, and that's a classic example. Similar work in Pakistan, but with the flooding. A lot of distribution of what we call non-food items, following a simple spreadsheet like this. The reason I wanted to show you this is because it gives you an idea of how your work helps, because we'll have an activity that we need to do, so distribute aqua tabs, distribute non-food items, which is like a kit, if you like, per family with various different bits in it, and well, depending on the response you're in. And sometimes the information we'll get will just be a column with a particular geographical admin area, and it can be really, really hard to work your way around that. So the more this information is being populated, the quicker we can work on these things, because the amount of time you spend in the field trying to find a location, or trying to find how to get there, or try and do your best logistically when you could actually be out on the ground doing things is huge. A couple of points that I like to make. I think the elderly is one thing. We think all the time of children in the field, and it's a huge part and a passion of my job. I have children, but they sort of miss out a lot of some of the response, even though they're a very vulnerable group, as do men. And a lot of the work that I've been doing recently is on assisting the elderly and assisting men, because they are a category that are missed out quite a bit. And all the information that comes out of these products ultimately helps to inform those projects that I'm now working on, which is fantastic. On to Afghanistan. A lot of work there ongoing. Obviously, it's a very changing environment. Now there's not so much of a military presence. And into a conflict area where this information is even more paramount, but actually more difficult to obtain, because it's less likely that you're going to be getting up-to-date satellite imagery for a lot of those areas for various reasons. I'm now working, and I have spent a lot of time working on the Syrian crisis, where we've had huge movement of people, and what's quite interesting there is you're not dealing with something like Haiti, where you've got what we call IDPs, internally displaced persons. You're dealing a lot with people that have crossed borders, and people that have, like in the migrant crisis across Europe, just come from like very, very far, and you don't know if they're primary, secondary, tertiary displaced. And the kind of mapping that you're doing, and some of the other work that is being done with remote sensing to look at this kind of movement using all sorts of things like lights at night is absolutely incredible, and it does make a difference, I promise you. I'm going to leave you with a video. You'll be glad to know, so I'll stop talking. Just of some of the work that's going on in Syria, and then I think the pizza's here. No?
Hopefully soon.
Okay, cool. So I'll leave you with this video, and then if anyone's got any questions, I can answer them afterwards maybe.